Shalom, shalom. This week we read Parshat Noach. Parshat Noach is fascinating, and it contains two colossal events in it. The first one being, of course, the flood, and the second one being the Tower of Babel. And it seems like they are unrelated, and it's hard to understand why these two huge events are placed in one parsha. But if you look at it closely, I think they're very related, and that there's something in the story of Noah that led perhaps to the incident of the Tower of Babel. And so I'm going to try to unpack that. It's very convoluted, and I hope you will follow me because it's a little difficult, but here goes. Okay. After the flood, when Noah exited the ark, and he planted a vineyard, he drank the wine, fell into a drunken stupor, and his son, Ham, did something disgraceful to him. What it was is up for debate. I actually wrote something on it a couple years ago. I'll try to put it in the comments section so you can see what I think it was. But the bottom line is, it doesn't matter what it was something horrible. And that when Noah arose from his drunken stupor and realized that Ham had done something to him, he right away cursed Canaan, Ham's son. And it says, I'll read you in English, that Noah woke from his wine and realized what his small son had done to him. And he said, "Cursed is Canaan, a slave of slaves shall he be to his brothers." And then also, when we know that he had, when he did fall into the drunken stupor, and that he uncovered himself in tent and he was naked, and we're told that the other two sons, Shem and Japhet, took the garment, walked backwards so as not to see their father's nakedness out of respect, and covered him. Apparently, this must have been Shem's idea, and Japhet agreed it was a good idea. But Shem is the one who gets this amazing blessing after he said, "Blessed is Hashem, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be a slave to him. May God extend Japhet, but he will dwell in the tents of Shem. May Canaan be a slave to them." So Shem is going to go on to be the one, the righteous one, and Japhet will get to live peacefully amongst him, and Canaan is supposed to be cursed and be a slave to them, the descendants of Canaan, who came from Ham, who perpetrated this horrible act. Now, if you look at the information that's given to us between this and the story of the flood, we're told a lot of little pieces of the puzzle that can help us build an understanding, I believe, of the Tower of Babel. Now, one of those things is we learn that Ham had these other sons. He had Cush, Mitzrayim, Put, and Canaan. And we're told that when Noah cursed, he cursed Canaan only. We don't hear him cursing Ham, which would be Ham and the rest of his descendants, but just we hear about Canaan. And now, one of these sons that we're told about, which was Cush, he gave birth to Nimrod, and Nimrod was not a good guy, I'll tell you that much, but he became a mighty hunter before Hashem, it says. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, okay? Babel, right? We're going to learn about the Tower of Babel. So we know that he was the leader of Babel. Okay, and so we have to keep this in mind. Nimrod, the son of Cush, who comes from Ham, goes and builds Babel because he becomes this mighty hunter, and he starts to get a little bit of a swollen head and delusions of grandeur, and he wants to build for himself a name, as we will look at in a moment. But let's also take a look at Shem. What does Shem do? Shem has children, and they were told, um, Shem has other children, and their dwelling place extended from, we're told, from um, Mimesha, Boacha, Sifara, Har HaKedem. Okay, so these are in the east, in the Kedem, which is important to keep in mind, because then when we get to the story of Babel, the words say that it was when all of the earth was one language and one common purpose. And it says, Vayhi benas am mikedem, and it was when they traveled from the east. So these people traveled for the east. Who was traveling from the east, and why were they traveling from the east? So my guesswork here is this, because we're told that it was Nimrod who made Babel and started this rebellion against God. Why was it that he picked up from the east and traveled? Now, we're told that Noach gave the blessing and the curse, we were told that the descendants of Canaan would have to live in the homes, the tents of Shem, and serve them. Now, Nimrod, who started to be a great hunter and started to have this ego build bigger and bigger, sees his brother, who stems from the same father, their families, as having to be second-class citizens to Shem in the East. And he didn't want to live like that. He said, I don't, his brother was cursed. He didn't want to be associated. He wanted to go and make himself his own name, his own Shem. Isn't it funny? He says, "Come, let us make for ourselves a Shem." Shem is the name of the son who got the blessing. So he wants to take the place of that Shem with his own self and put himself in the place of Shem and build his own legacy. And so that's what I think it means. I think it was always misunderstood when it says that they were one people speaking one language. And, people say, well, what was so bad about that? And I think what was so bad about that is that they didn't want to be one people with one language, with one mission, when that mission had to do with Noah's blessing and curse, which they weren't a part of the upper class citizens. They were brothers to Canaan, the slaves. They were the sons of Ham, who perpetrated this horrible sin. Nimrod, who comes from Ham, wanted to make himself that position. And he wanted to build this humongous tower and storm the heavens, meaning he's going to not fall into this way of life of being inferior. And he was going to he was gathering all of these followers just so that they don't have to be a part of that narrative. And what was wrong with that was that narrative was working. Noah set up a system where was harmonious, and the chain of events and the way that things happened with Shem, with the descendants of Shem and Ham and Yafet, were working until Nimrod came along. And he took this harmonious, unified lifestyle of the people, and he caused a ruckus by trying to create a separate name, and just out of ego and a desire to be the one. And that's what's so bad. When you have a peaceful, harmonious world and you need to shake it up because you have a humongous ego that you need to be the one with the name, that's how all the horrible tyranny happens in all the countries where you get these tyrannical rulers because they are on the power trips. And then we see what happens in places like Russia and Iran and so forth because of leaders like that. And that's what God objected to. Don't take a peaceful world and try and ruin it because you want a name for yourself. Disgraceful. So that's how I think that they're connected. And I think the lesson is if there's peace and harmony working, we shouldn't let our ego get involved and say, well, but I'm here on the food chain and I should be here and I should have a name meaning recognition for who I think I am, which is so great. If you're great, you'll naturally rise to the top. You don't put yourself there. You don't try and build a tower to heaven just to have the whole world recognize that. I think there's a lesson for the whole world and so many countries to learn from. And I hope they do before it's too late. Anyway, well, you know what? God promised never to destroy the world. So at least there's that. But in the meantime, um, that's all I got to say. And I wish you a Shabbat Shalom. Enjoy.